Okay, let's talk about airsoft upgrades and where to start. Because I see a lot of guys online saying, hey, I want to upgrade my gun, but I don't know how. So let's hit the easy stuff. Before you get started, ask yourself, what does the airsoft gun not do that you want it to do? Or, here's a mess. What do you want the airsoft, or what do you want it to do better? Like, for example, I was playing a game several years ago, not with this gun, and what's the camera a little? I was sitting behind cover. I take the rifle, I pop out from cover, pull the trigger to fire, pop back into cover, and the gun didn't fire. What actually happened was I pulled the trigger, the electric motor in the grip started spinning, the gears moved around, and then I let go of the trigger, which caused the flow of electricity into the motor to stop, and I popped back into cover, all before the gears had turned far enough to cock the piston and fire. So, lesson learned, I wanted a gun like that. I said, wasn't this gun. It was a really old G&G combat machine, and that had motor problems back in the day. But that taught me, like, I wanted a gun that would cycle faster, have a better trigger response. Maybe you're playing and you see players off in the distance and your gun can't hit them. You start shooting at them, the BBs are going all over the place, or the BBs are falling short, or you can't tell where the BBs are going. So, like, before you just start randomly buying parts to install in your gun, think about what you actually want the gun to do differently on the field. Because, frankly, just buying parts is not going to make you a good airsoft player. You need to actually be a good airsoft player, and then the gun just kind of makes it easier. So, when it comes to upgrading, let's talk about some of the internals, or start from the beginning. Now, if your problem with the gun is that it's inaccurate, the easiest way and the most bang for your buck way to improve that is to start shooting heavier BBs. Like, if you're using 0.2 gram BBs, they get blown around in the wind a lot. If you use a heavier BB, since we're all dealing with round projectiles, it gives you a higher ballistic coefficient, more wind resistant, and the BB will hold its energy better when it's getting friction from the air as it's traveling forward towards the target. So your total time for the BB to hit the target at the same energy level, even though you've got a slightly lower muzzle velocity, is generally better. So in most cases, if you're having, it's dusty, if you're having accuracy problems, start by getting heavier BBs. And that doesn't even require opening this up at all. Now, one problem you're likely to run into with heavier BBs is, in order to get them to torque right, your hop-up's essentially adding force to the top of the BB, but not the bottom, and as it spins, that force is called a torque, and the spin creates a Bernoulli effect to kind of resist dropping. And one of the problems is, with most hop-ups, you have a tiny little, like, finger that, like, you have this rubber finger that hangs down into your hop-up chamber, and the BB pushes past it. And the way to get that to apply more torque to the BB is basically you lower it. So, like, the hop-up unit might just be barely touching the BB, and it'll give you a little bit of spin, or you need it really low, and it gives you a whole lot of friction on the top of the BB to get out. The problem is, with those traditional finger-type hop-up adjustments, as you increase the, basically turn up the hop-up, lower the finger down into the hop-up chamber, you're also effectively blocking the BB. So the BB actually slows down pretty significantly as it has to push that rubber finger out of the way. Now, you can get around a lot of that problem by switching to a more modern style hop-up bucking. The R hops used to be popular, flat hops used to be popular, still are. to some extent. Right now, as of 2024, what I think is probably the best way to do this is to go with a maple leaf system. What they've done is, instead of having like this arm that sticks down, they have this flat surface that sticks down. So the BB will rub against a much longer contact surface, so you have more room to impart that torque without having to stick down in front where the BB has to force that whole thing out of the way. And that will avoid the problem of your BB slowing down when you have that hop-up turned on for heavy BBs. Just to give you some examples, my wife's got a Lancer Tactical Gen 2, and it shoots about 1.4 to 1.5 joules if we put 0.2 gram BBs in. If we put 0.3 gram BBs in with that stock hop-up, we have to turn the hop-up way on, and that slows the BB down significantly, and it's actually only shooting at about 1 joule, maybe a little under, because a lot of that energy is getting used to push the BB, or to push the bucking out of the way as it spins forward. So you can get a huge amount of benefit by just switching out your hop-up nub and bucking. What I would personally recommend is the Maple Leaf Macaroon bucking. The MR hop is good also. I've tried both. I got slightly better accuracy out of the Macaroon. But that hop, the Maple Leaf hop-up bucking, and it needs its own special nub to push that down. Your stock nub is not going to work with that bucking. So when you go order it, you can get a Maple Leaf bucking and an Omega nub, and it'll cost you something like 15 to 20 bucks plus shipping, so 20 bucks, and that makes a huge difference. One thing to bear in mind when you order that, though, that has a ridge on the inside of the bucking that needs to fit into a groove on the inside of your barrel, and I'll drop in a picture here of what I mean. If your stock barrel doesn't have that groove, you will need a new barrel, or you'll have a lot of air loss. Even if you try like wrapping around with Teflon tape, and I know I tried, you really need to get the proper barrel that has that groove cut into it. I have never noticed a accuracy difference by changing out the barrels. So I've had good luck with Action Army barrels. They just work. And they have that groove, and they're something like 30, 35 bucks. Now, that said, if you have a defective barrel, that can be a problem. I once, on a KWA CQR many years ago, I got a barrel that was scratched on the inside, and the forging actually had air pockets in it. So there was if you look down the barrel tube, you could actually see metal was missing on the inside of the barrel, and that was horribly inaccurate. Also, if your barrel's dirty, that can be a problem. So as long as you have a clean barrel, it doesn't seem to really matter much what brand barrel it is. So next thing to talk about. Just talked about how to improve accuracy with BBs, hop-up. I will say your hop-up unit does have a slight effect on accuracy. And you can find some tests that have been done on different hop-up units comparing the accuracy. Honestly, with most guns, the stock hop-up is pretty good. The last time I looked at somebody testing these, it was a G&G hop-up unit, just completely stock hop-up unit, actually produced better results than a lot of aftermarket hop-ups. So yeah, it's a factor, but it's a pretty minor factor when it comes to accuracy. Now, next thing, let's talk about range. If your BBs, once you have those heavyweight BBs and are properly hopping them, if your BBs aren't going as far as you want them to do, you can switch to a heavier spring, which will give your BB more energy going up. And frankly, with the same hop-up BB, the same hop-up, the same spin, same barrel and everything, a BB that's going at 300 feet per second, all else being equal, will not go as far as the BB that's going 350 feet per second, or whatever your local field limits are. So you kind of want to get a mainspring that will get you up towards your field limits in order to get that extra range, whatever your field allows, so you're comparable to the others. Now, when it comes to springs, every manufacturer has different ratings, and a lot of things go into the velocity that you're going to end up getting with the BB leaving the barrel. A lot of the cheaper springs tend to produce much, much higher velocities than they claim. Like, I had one spring that was supposed to get up to, I think it was supposed to be shooting from 370 to 390 FPS according to the manufacturer, and then I threw it in an old KWA gun I don't have anymore, and it was shooting at over 450. Way higher than it was supposed to be rated for. And I've had similar experience with a lot of the Rocket Airsoft springs that Atlanta Airsoft is running. So when you go to buy a replacement spring, first off, get a chronograph so you can test the velocity at home without going anywhere. Generally, I would actually recommend buying not just one spring, but probably buy 2 or 3. So you've got like the spring you think you need, and one spring heavier and one spring lighter. Just because springs are about $10 and shipping is about $10. So if you're buying the spring and it's the wrong one and you have to go buy another spring that's heavier or lighter, not only are you waiting for shipping to ship again, just kind of annoying if you're impatient like I am, you're also paying shipping twice. You might as well just buy the extra springs and not have to worry about it later. And that ends up with you having a bunch of springs in your spare parts box, so if you need to adjust later on a different gun, grab the springs out of your spare parts box and see if one of those will work. Save yourself some trouble. You do have to be careful that like every field has velocity limits. Like this gun is set up for CQB, originally set up for Texas paintballs. Airsoft rules for their CQB, which was 1.14 joules, and this shoots about 1 to 1.1 joules. This thing over there behind me was set up to be a DMR. Most of the fields near me allow a DMR velocities. They advertise 400 FPS with 0.2s, which translates into 1.8 something joules, and that gun behind me is shooting about 1.7 to get up close to that limit, to get as much range as I can within the field rules. Okay, so we've talked about accuracy, we've talked about range. Let's talk about trigger response and rate of fire. Like, when you pull this, you want it to go bzz, or bzz, and actually have a BB come out in a reasonable amount of time. Now, a lot of people online will talk about shimming and MOSFETs and changing out your gears, and all of that is good stuff, but that's also a lot of work because you're going to have to disassemble your gearbox probably multiple times to fit parts in. The most bang for your buck in terms of how much money it's going to cost and how much labor of your time is it going to take is to replace your motor. Now, when you're looking for a different motor, what I would generally recommend is find a motor that uses neodymium magnets. I may be mispronouncing that. And also look at the rated TPA of the motor. The TPA is going to be your turns per armature. And a lot of people will advertise high torque or high speed. Really, those are just advertising gimmicks. Inside the motor, it's a bunch of copper coils. The more times the copper coil goes around the motor, the more torque it'll generate. The more torque it'll generate. The fewer times, the less torque it'll generate, but potentially more speed because you've got bigger wires. The trade-off here, though, is a high torque motor will start spinning faster and will get up to full speed much faster than a high speed motor will. So if you're shooting primarily on semi-automatic, you want a high torque motor because that'll get up to speed quickly for that one fast semi-auto shot that you want. If you're planning to do a lot of full auto fire and you want to increase your rate of fire on full auto, you want a high speed motor because when you pull the trigger, it will take it a little longer to get up to full speed, but once it is up to full speed, it'll be firing faster on full auto. And you can also find balanced motors. Like what's in here is an ASG, I think 40K motor, which is kind of a balance in between. So if you're planning to do something like I am, where you want decent trigger response, but occasionally you want to flip it over to a 3-shot burst and bzz, 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 get those 3-shot bursts out. I kind of like the balanced motor. You can generally get a motor for about $50. And in terms of installing it, you've just got those 3 screws. Take out the 2 screws at the bottom, pull your old motor out, drop your new motor in, put up the connectors. You have to do a little tweaking with the motor height adjustment. That's the middle screw there. If it's the motor's engaged to, basically that adjusts how high up the motor sits and potentially how it engages the gears in the gearbox. Frankly, you can tell by hearing. Like, shoot it, turn the motor out a little bit, listen to it, and you'll very easily be able to tell this sounds right, or this sounds too tight and it's not firing, or this sounds too loose and it's not firing. So you kind of want to play with that a little to get your motor height done. But by far the easiest way to improve your trigger response or your rate of fire on full auto is to just change out the motor. So let's talk about externals. Generally, when it comes to the externals, you want to buy a gun that you aren't going to have to change the externals on other than attachments. So like if you want to switch out the handguard on a gun, that will potentially cost you $75 to $150 for a new handguard. If you want to change out the stock, you're looking at $30 to $100. If you want to change out your barrel length and add a different inner barrel length, and which is going to require a different outer barrel length, which is going to require a different handguard. Changing your barrel length it will easily cost you a couple $100. So for things like that, I would recommend you just buy the gun that's got the externals you want to begin with. Now, when it comes to attachments on your gun, these I would say are worth looking at. We have a couple different examples here. So this was the CQB gun I mentioned. I like a red dot sight. This just gets you on target faster and allows you to shoot faster than the other guy. So like if you don't have sights and you're not using your sights, you're going to be shooting several BBs and then just like walking them into the target and adjusting. If you have a sight, you put that sight right on your target, and plus or minus wind, you'll be pretty close to actually hitting it. Personally, I like Picatinny rails, and I put rail covers on all of mine because that's just more comfortable if you've got to grab at your cheese grater in your hand. But anyways, sights, get sights you can see at the range you're going to be shooting. This is a close range gun. This is fine out to 75 feet or so. If you're going longer ranges, you probably want a magnified optic. This is a Leupold 2 to 6 behind, or 2 to 7 behind me. And I know people say airsoft ranges are short enough you don't really need the magnification. I have found that even at 50 or 100 feet, you want to be able to identify your target, because I have personally spent like 10 minutes shooting somebody, and I'm like, why is this guy not calling his hits? And then after the game finished, I walked over and discovered I was shooting a plastic bag that was just spinning in the wind. It's like a black garbage bag. And I thought it was like a person coming out from behind cover and then going back as it repeatedly, and I repeatedly shot the plastic bag. So for things like that, having magnification is good. Also, for watching how the wind is affecting your BBs, magnification is great. Because if you're shooting at longer range, wind is going to be a big factor. And if you can see the wind is blowing your BBs off to the right or off to the left, and I just did that wrong, whatever, you can then know how to adjust your next shot. So you really want enough magnification that you can actually see your 6mm white plastic BB all the way out to the target. You know, you might be hitting some twigs between you and the target. The BBs might be falling short of the target and you don't realize it. So you want an optic that will let you see the BB on its entire length of travel. And iron sights work, don't get me wrong. If that's what you got, use them. But it's a good option. Next thing I want to mention is vertical grips. Now, vertical grips, I know this is controversial. A lot of people will say you should do your C-clamp grip up front. I think it's like that way for a C-clamp grip, or angled grips. Personally, what I have found is when I'm playing long games, I'll tend to carry the gun low on my chest, can't quite see on the camera, bring it up, and grabbing the vertical grip and the rear grip here. And this keeps my wrist straight. If on a long game you grab up front here, your wrist is twisted up. Now, I'm a software engineer by trade, and carpal tunnel is kind of like the big job-related injury that happens there if people are typing a lot and their wrists are twisted up. So, but what I found is first time I had carpal tunnel issues was actually in an airsoft game, because I was holding this gun down and twisting up my wrist to do it. So, if you're going to be carrying the gun for a while, I would highly recommend a vertical grip. And just to comment on that, a lot of people with the vertical grips will grab like this and wrap their thumb around. A much better way to do it is to grab up high. So you can see my thumb is on the side of the gun or even up top. This gets you, basically your hand is closer to the axis you're firing from. If you want to go with a short stubby grip, you don't need something as long. As you can see, I've got unused grip sticking out here. And that having your hand up closer to where you're firing is a lot more intuitive. If you'll see paintballers do it where they're entirely point shooting, they'll generally grab much higher up and I don't have a paintball gun handy, but will like wrap their thumb around the barrel to fire, which is, I mean, if you can do that with an airsoft gun, go for it. Also works with real guns, just be aware that your handguard's going to heat up. And that's why we've been using aluminum heat shields for the last 60 years. Okay, so, a couple other unusual things that you'll see on these. If you're playing a lot of games indoors or transitioning from outdoors to indoors, you may want a flashlight. Maybe. I have personally never actually used this flashlight in a game. It's mostly there just so it's ergonomically similar to a real rifle I have that does have a flashlight there. A lot of people will put on fake silencers. They look cool. In terms of actually affecting your on-field performance, they're not that significant. One advantage of this is it will cover if you happen to have a longer inner barrel. Like, I think the inner barrel on this sticks out about here, so it's not an original inner barrel. Really, I actually like the silence, they call it a mock suppressor on this one, simply because when I'm shooting out windows, the gun is a little longer and I don't get muzzle strike, or I don't get window sill strikes. Like, if we go to shoot this, you'll notice my sights are up here, my barrel is down here. If you're shooting out a window, you can be looking down your sights and seeing your target, but the end of your gun is actually pointed at the windowsill, And when you fire it, you end up shooting the windowsill that's a foot in front of you instead of actually hitting your target. And then you just need to bring the gun up a little bit to go over the windowsill. I found the longer suppressor is a little more intuitive for me, so that's why I did it. Also, I wanted this to be ergonomically close to a real gun that I have, which is a 16-inch barrel, so added that extra length. This isn't quite 16, but it's longer. I think it's like, probably 14 and a half, maybe 15. Anyways, that's flashlights. We'll cover slings in a separate video, but just something to be aware of. Your sling attachment, if you're using a specific sling, needs to match. Let's come over to this one. Something else for external attachments you may see is a bipod. Now, I have never used a bipod in an airsoft game, but some games require for a 5.56 DMR that you have a bipod. So this gun has a cheap bipod. I did talk about these bipods in another video, and this matters a little more for the real steel shooters. You want a bipod that the legs flip forward, not backwards. And the reason for this is when you go to shoot it, mostly for real shooters, you're going to want to push the gun forward, so when it recoils back, you're kind of preloading it by pushing forward on that bipod. The other thing you're going to want is a bipod that can rotate. And now, when I say rotate, I don't mean pan, I mean rotate like this. The gun's steady. You can see this bipod rotates left and right. The reason you want that is if you're putting your gun down on a bipod and the ground isn't completely level, you want to be able to rotate your gun. For real steel long-range shooting, part of that is so you can get your optic lined up perfectly flat for a consistent zero, and those guys will even put like a level, like what you get at Home Depot, except much smaller, of a liquid level, so that they can make sure everything's set up right. For airsoft, you want to keep your hop up vertical, but it's not quite as fussy. Really, I have never used this in an airsoft game, and frankly, I'm getting old and don't want to have to kneel down and get back up during an airsoft game. So I try to stay standing, which makes the bipod mostly a decoration, but some fields require you to have a bipod for a 5.56 DMR. Third Coast Airsoft is the big one there. So that's pretty much it. Talked about accuracy upgrades, potentially with your hop-up setup. Talked about rate of fire upgrades, motor. Talked about range, which is going to be your spring and your BB weight. And we briefly went over external add-ons. Not quite upgrades, but... Anyways, I hope this video was helpful. I've got another complete videos about all sorts of different pieces of gear and what to look for when you're going to purchase those. And I'll be talking about slings in an upcoming video. Thanks for watching. Hope it was helpful. Don't forget to subscribe. You made it all the way to the end. Click the little subscribe and the like. It's 2024. Y'all know how YouTube works. Have a good day.